Then finally, there's the Big Splash Project, and the Big Splash Project is what tends to get most of the press. They're what we hear about most often, things like Old Spice. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Big Splash Project in depth in a little bit. Well, here it actually is. So Old Spice is one of the best examples. It was absolutely brilliant. But by the way, when you look at Old Spice as a case study, one of the most salient features is the fact that it's good marketing 101. The Whedon and Kennedy, who ran the campaign, were looking at how men's bath products were being marketed. And primarily at the time, they were being marketed to men. They were showing women with big bosoms and cleavage and getting guys excited. But what they found was it wasn't the guys who were doing the purchasing of these projects. It was often their girlfriends or their wives. So, gee, why shouldn't they start marketing to the girlfriends and wives? Which is why you see Mustafa Isaiah here, this really handsome-looking guy. And then one of the things, of course, they did was they really got involved with very particular small communities of people on 4chan and later on Facebook and YouTube, and actually made videos specific to influencers in those communities. Hoodie Remix was a fabulous campaign done by the Knight Agency here in New York, where they took this brand that was actually kind of lagging and seen as a tired old brand, but they allowed people to come in and create their own versions of what they wanted to see a hoodie look like. And they had a huge contest. Then they actually made the winning product for a brief while. Pepsi Refresh, one of the most brilliant campaigns where they took the money out of conventional marketing and they said to America, America, who do you want this money to go to? And so everybody jumped in and they proposed this and they proposed this organization and that organization. And then after they had all of their nominations in place, Pepsi was able to come back later and say, okay, now vote on these. And then finally the money was distributed at the community level. Really developed a lot of participation. Quicksilver. Quicksilver is a surfing and skateboarding apparel company. And the company that did the marketing for them got a bunch of guys together and they went out to a pond in the middle of a city park pond. And you see a guy kind of paddling his surfboard out to the middle of the pond, and somebody else up on a bridge and then throws a piece of dynamite into the water, and boom, it makes a big wave. The guy gets up and surfs on the wave, and it made an extremely viral video that really spread like crazy. So when we look at these campaigns, we say, well, why were they so successful? We know that predominantly the ones I just showed had big budgets, huge budgets. Very large advertising agencies were involved with them. They were often supported by traditional media with TV ads as well. But then you look at a campaign, I'm going to throw in the Blendtec. And Blendtec did not spend a lot of money. In fact, they started off their campaign with a $200 flip cam. And basically, it's where the CEO of the company is doing some experiments with the Blendtec, this blender, and he would throw things in like a cell phone and, hey, let's see what happens. And for a company of this size, it is not a big company, but today they've got over 100,000 likers on Facebook, up from like 80,000 just a few months back. A lot of coverage. So they did not have a big budget, nor did they have traditional media support. So what do we see across all of these brands that were successful? What do they all have in common? And we see the element of fun. Fun is pretty ubiquitous in quite a few of these. The Quicksilver, seeing somebody surf on a wave from dynamite, that's a lot of fun. Throwing things into a blender, a lot of fun. We see the element of the unexpected. Surprise. Surprise may not be a good thing with customer service, but when it comes to social media campaigns, it's just the delight that people get from it. Participatory, allowing people to participate, getting that kinesthesia involved. Many of you might remember the types of postcards that various marketers would send out and say, hey, stick this sticker over here and send it in and we'll get you this. And just by the virtue that somebody would have to put the sticker on the circle, that it would get more involvement. And in fact, it did. You didn't have to put the sticker on the circle, but just the participation of it helped encourage you to do so. And then finally, cross-media. This particular example here is the Uniqlo campaign that was in New York last year, and you would see the messages on billboards in the city. Then you'd go down to the subway and you'd see a variation on the message, and it would continue to flow through your experience as you went through the city, as you got got on a bus or a cab, wherever you might go, right into the store. Now, cross-media is an interesting concept, and if you're interested in it, there's the book called The Dentsu Way, where the Japanese agency, one of the largest advertising agencies in Asia, really uses a lot of cross-media to market their things. Henry Jenkins is a wonderful professor out of University of Southern California at Annandale School of Communications, and he's like the godfather of cross-media communications, and not from a marketing standpoint, but just in how it can be used as a media. And he suggested these very strong points that help to make things stronger in cross-media and why they become so very poignant to people. So as marketers, to bring it back to our world, part of our job is if we consider these cross-media elements and we use it sort of as a checklist, well, how can we make this social media campaign more viral, more catchy through the use of cross-media? Coca-Cola recently did a beautiful presentation called Liquid and Linked, and I'm going to recommend everybody see it. It's on YouTube. And Jonathan Mildenhall talks about how Coca-Cola, which is one of, if not the most successful global brand, is out to double its revenue by the year 2020. Now, when you consider the size of that, the enormity of it, it's just incredible. And one of the things he talks about in his presentation, that they're fundamentally going to do that using storytelling. And storytelling is so powerful. We can consider how we use storytelling. Look to see how Coca-Cola is using storytelling, for instance, on their Pinterest board. And you see that they are telling a story. You can tell a story through long-term communications on Twitter or even on Facebook. And storytelling just is sort of bringing narrative arc to what you're talking about so that it pulls people in. People are hardwired to respond to storytelling. So throughout your marketing endeavors, think about how you can bring storytelling to play as well. One of the things that we use in our shop when we deal with influencers is the notion of not all influencers are equal, nor are their behaviors equal. So if we're doing an influencer campaign, we've developed a little scorecard. So you can sort of think through whether an individual that you're researching is an influencer on what level, on a scale of 1 to 5. And say 5 is he's very influential. We're talking, this is Oprah of influencers here. And then there's actions that they can take, and some actions are going to have different levels. For instance, if they retweet you, not going to be worth a lot. Maybe I'll just give that a 1 score. Whereas if they actually go out of their way and write a blog post about you or put you on the cover of their magazine, that's going to have a lot more value. So while you can change how you want to weight different things, this is a tool you can use in your own influencer program. Another thing that you're going to want to start all of your social media projects out with is a really clear understanding of what your resources are available to you. So even if you have vendors or if you're the only person on your social media team, it's going to be very simple. However, you may have some other people in the company available to you. You may have a vendor. You may have the CEO of the company involved. And this is just a way of mapping out the availability of resources for you so that if you're really going to make a social media marketing plan, you need to have an understanding of the resources. Then what we also do is we take consideration, usually on a quarterly basis, how we're going to distribute our effort over different platforms. In quarter 1, for instance, we might be putting 90% of our effort into Facebook and putting off too much effort on Twitter, or we might be putting a preponderance of our effort on our blog. And by starting our social media planning off with this big picture of effort distribution, if you will, it just helps us go from there to create a more granular plan. Another thing is to consider that throughout your social media efforts, that your activities are going to basically fall into 4 major groups. They're not necessarily linear. You may do your identity work, which is going out there and making sure that your profiles are true to your brand, that they're saying what you want. And then from there, you're going to start making connections with people and then creating content. And then you're going to actually be having engagement with people. Sometimes you might be doing content creation and continuing to make connections. But if you understand that it's these basic 4 elements of activities, it just helps, again, for that planning effort. Another thing to consider is in all of your marketing efforts online about how they can help one another. In many ways, the idea of an integrated digital marketing is a bit of a holy grail that many of us in the industry talk about, but there are real overlaps that we can use to help. We know, for instance, that all of that work we do in social media is helping our backlinks for search engine optimization. We know that the blog is very, very central to both social media. Every time we publish new content, it's something we can share on social media and create conversations and engagement, and at the same time that's helping search engine optimization. Research is common to all three endeavors across the way. And the paid, not just PPC, but all digital marketing, there's less crossover. However, you can consider creating ads that actually help support your blog and your social efforts as well with paid social advertising. It can be very powerful. It's an opportunity that I see a lot of people missing. And finally, one of the final things that I want to talk about is passion and purpose behind the brand. And I think if the entire problem of going out there on social media and becoming social as an organization, I usually find is divided here. Organizations that have a very clear understanding of their purpose and the passion behind their brand usually have very little difficulty because they can go out in the world and talk about that passion, and they can develop communities based on that passion. What Nike is doing, for instance, they're talking about sports in a way. They're not necessarily selling shoes all the time. One writer suggested that there's these very 5 major components of purpose, and eliciting joy, enabling connection, inspiring exploration, and evoking pride, and impacting society as being big, big purpose. Now, most of us know that a company exists to make money. Coca-Cola, in their presentation, did in fact talk about doubling their income. They're really having to attend to those shareholders. However, at the same time, they talk about the purpose behind their brand. What they lead with is that they're about happiness. They're in the happiness business. They're not in competition with the stuff in the blue can. They're more in competition with, say, Disney and Pixar because they're in the happiness business. Very much changes the tenor of how you go out into social media and talk. And some of the great examples that I'm seeing of that, in fact, are Coca-Cola with the happiness, Nike, as I mentioned before. Dove's purpose is helping women feel good about themselves. Now, just imagine Dove. They make soap. And if you're a marketer for Dove and you're going out there and your problem was, well, gee, we got to sell more bars of soap, versus our problem is we want to help women feel good about themselves, how that very much affects how you can work in social media.